Hey everyone, and welcome to the October edition of 3030. I am Pat Reinhardt from Conductor, and it is a very, very special edition today because 3030 is turning 4. We've made it 4 years, since I started 3030 a long time ago, so we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the H1 controversy that Google has created, which has, really, stirred a lot of, conversation. I would say controversy might not be the right word, but conversation. As promised from last episode, we're going to give you an update on the September 2019 core update. We're going to talk about EAT and why you should not rent experts. That was a fun, thing that was going around the last couple of weeks. We're also going to talk about MDOT URLs. Yes, I don't know what year it is, but yes, that is what we're going to be talking about too. And we're going to be talking about educating, folks internally often. I actually threw this in last minute because I was at a meeting and it inspired me. So I wanted to talk about that. So let's get into it because we only have 30 minutes. Number one, happy birthday 3030. Everyone, we are 4 years old officially. I started at Conductor just under 5 years ago. And a few months in, Seth Besmertnik, our CEO, texted me at midnight on a Saturday, as he does, and said, hey man, you're sending out a lot of great stuff to the company. How can we get this to our customers? And I basically said, I don't know. And he said, how about a webinar? I said, I've never done that before. He goes, well, you might do one now. And here we are 4 years later, because 2 months after that, in October of 2015, we did our first episode of 3030. And the funny thing is that the format has not really changed. Basically we get on, I talk, I enjoy everyone's feedback and answering questions. But again, I just want to say a humongous thank you to everyone who joins the program on a regular basis. I say this all the time. This is my favorite part of my job, and I wouldn't be able to do it without you guys. And I'm so appreciative and humbled that you spend 30 minutes of your very, very important hours in your day with me every month. And like I said, it's been a blessing, honestly, to be able to do this show and just have an open forum about SEO, talking about SEO. So it's really exciting. And so 4 years. Thank you guys so much. Looking forward to the next 4, but let's get into the SEO stuff before I start to cry. So number one, the H1 controversy that Google just created. So this one was a fun one, over the last couple of weeks. So during a Webmaster Central, office hours, John Mueller, basically was asked if having multiple H1s was okay. And for the most part, that's a fine argument. But then towards the end of that, he actually made the statement that H1s are not a critical ranking factor. And as it does, the SEO community immediately launched into a flurry and started to argue points back and forth and prove him wrong, prove him right, things of that nature. All great conversation. So let's go through what he said in a very simple format. So for the most part, he said that you can have multiple H1s on a page, and I'm gonna go through my thoughts on these in a couple minutes. He said they're a great way to give a page more structure, which is fine. And then he said your site can do fine with no H1 tags or 5 H1 tags, and that's where we're gonna start because that last one is absolute trash, because I can tell you that, from my, so I've been SEO for about 16 years. I've worked on thousands of sites. I am very lucky to have access to, many terabytes of data here at Conductor, or probably even more than that. It's probably a higher one that I should probably say, but I don't want to misspeak. But at the end of the day, I can tell you with full confidence that H1, having keyword-rich H1s that are coded properly have an impact on the quality of the content on your site. And I think that's where people were getting mixed up, at least in my opinion. Again, all this is my opinion. So for the most part, when people think of ranking factor, that's probably where they're getting held up here, right? Because he said it wasn't a critical ranking factor. But I don't view H1s as a ranking factor. I view them as a part of a ranking factor. And that ranking factor is the quality of the content that they are contained within, right? So when you think of it that way, the H1 provide structure to a page. I've said throughout the course of my career, and I still say this and stand by this today, that when you look at a piece of content, you should view it as like a newspaper article or a magazine article, right? And the H1 is the headline of your page. And that headline should include your major theme or your primary keyword. That's what I tell all of our customers, and I stand by that. Now, a few years ago, I would have argued to the death about the multiple H1 thing, where that's open the conversation, and I am a lot more flexible on that point. I'm a lot more flexible in the multiple H1 because I know after the birth of HTML5, yes, technically, and I mean technically like as in coding, literally technically, you can have multiple H1s and be fine. And that's a point that I will still argue back and forth, but that's one that's open for debate, right? And that's fine, and that's what SEO is about. It's a game of opinions, right? So at the end of the day, hearing that's not surprising to me, even though I am still an advocate of only having one because I do believe it should act as the headline of the page. The no H1 thing is absolute garbage, because I can tell you that there are multiple tests out there, and I've done a lot myself, and I should have included one here, so that's my bad. But there are multiple tests that have been done that when you remove H1 tags or make them not keyword rich, your rankings go down. Actually, if you go to Search Engine Roundtable, I was looking through an article just the other day there that was talking about this. And there actually is an example in the comments section. I can't remember. I should have taken a screenshot of it. But basically saying, basically showing that when you remove the H1, when this individual removed H1 tags, his rankings tanked. And that is just something that I cannot ignore and something I just will not agree with. And it's because when going back to the point I made before, that the H1 is an entity within a ranking factor, right? The ranking factor is the quality of your content. And that includes your title tag, your meta description, your H1 tags, your H2 tags, and the body content of your page. That's what I consider the quality of the content, the quote-unquote ranking factor. The H1 contributes to that factor, right? And also, if you go back to my, my example before, where you are, when you're looking at your page as like a newspaper article or a magazine article and having that headline, that provides great structure, which goes back to John's earlier point, because he did say they're a great way to give a page more structure, and it helps Google understand what that page is about. So why would I not want to have an H1 act as a headline that gives the major theme of what we're trying to accomplish, right? And then have body content and H2s to structure the different areas or different ideas that lead back up and build that theme around the content. And that's how I look at it. So a lot of people went into a tizzy about this, was like, well, maybe I don't need to put H1s about this. I had several customers reach out and say, hey, should I remove the H1s? Should I do something to the H1s? In my opinion, if you do not do anything, do not change the H1s, continue to optimize for the H1. If you have multiple H1s, call me up, we can argue about it. You'll probably lose, it's okay, we'll be fine, we'll still be friends. But at the end of the day, that one is up for debate. The multiple aspect of it is still up for debate. I cannot get on board with the no H1 thing because I know that very recently I've run a test where we added, kind of to prove the point of SEO to someone, we ran a test where we took about 10 pages and we added keywords into the H1s and saw the page go from obscurity up to, page 1, 2, and 3. But just seeing that increase immediately after we added that, and I think that's because, or I know it's because, rather, that we added to the quality of that piece of content through the H1. So if you've been talking about this or hearing about this, that's my opinion on it. I've talked to a lot of people. Most people agree with me. Again, some people are, hey, listen, it's just a coding thing. It doesn't really matter. It's all about the overall quality of the content, and that's totally fine. But for me, the H1 is a piece of that quality, right? It's an element of that quality, and that's how I am going to choose to look at it. And until I run a test where I change something in an H1 and it doesn't have a ranking impact or some type of impact that shows that the page is moving in the right direction, I just cannot get on board with the fact that they're saying that you can do fine with no H1 tags. I simply just don't believe that because I know it's not true, at least right now in 2019. So at the end of the day, before I get too ranty, I'm going to move on from that, but that's my opinion there. So As promised, last month, we met and got together right as the September 2019 core update was rolling out, and unfortunately, all I could really talk about was that they announced it. It was way too early to give any winners or losers or see any factors that we felt were being impacted. So I went back, I looked, I did a lot of reading. I looked through a ton of conductor accounts, just looking for things in different areas and different verticals. I talked to a lot of friends in the industry just to see what they were seeing. And for the most part, I am not going to shock anyone here today because it's been it's been more of the same, right? The biggest themes that we've seen are the ones that we've been talking about all year as these core algorithm updates, have been rolling out. And as usual, not surprising, anyone who wants a really detailed breakdown and has more than 30 minutes to spend with me, go read Glenn Gabe's breakdown of it. He does a great job every single time. The guy's amazing, very, very smart, very good insight, great tests, great examples. But for the most part, he boiled it down really good and confirmed a lot of the stuff that I was thinking, seeing, and hearing. So the major areas that we saw, again, nothing crazy. Overall technical health, I saw a lot of sites that had done a lot of fixing and a lot of page speed improvements, a lot of broken link, internal linking improvements, things of that nature. I saw them, move forward when this happened, and folks who had a lot of technical issues on their site, see a dip as well. So that one kind of confirmed that for me. Again, something that is not surprising at all is, folks who are still doing aggressive advertising, where there are several ads above the fold or just in your face. You can barely even use the website because of the ads. That is something that we are continuously seeing as a factor in all of these things. So if you're doing that, and you saw declines, that's why. General user experience issues, and these are things of just the site being broken, lagging. Page speed can play into this, but just overall usage of the site if people are pogo sticking or things of that nature. That played into this. Another one which I have spoken about at nauseum, honestly at nauseum, on this program is folks who had indexing and indexing or indexation issues and canonical issues. Saw a decline here. Again, which is not surprising. So this is sites who have a lot of extraneous pages in the index, and also pages that are just junky pages, search result pages, parameter-driven pages. They did not do well through this as well. And again, unsurprisingly, we saw big shifts in the medical and health sectors again. So Google is still trying to figure out sites, with YMYL or Your Money, Your Life type content. So that's something that we saw once again, big, shifts and, some big, some not so big, but definite, noticeable changes on the day that the update rolled out. And, with that saying, what do you do in that? And, what Glenn Gabe talks about a lot and what a lot of people talk about, continuing to take care of every aspect of your site. I think we're all always trying to pinpoint one or two or three things, that were the cause or the silver bullet. And again, not to go down this rabbit hole too far because I've gone down it so many times. It's really the kitchen sink approach, and that's how Glenn Gabe puts it. It's really it's not about taking care of just the technical aspect of your site. It's not about taking care of just the the content, aspect of your site. It's not about links. It's not about authority. It's not about this. It's not that. It's about all of it. It's about everything. And as these major these core algorithms roll out, that's something that we all should continue to think about. I know I've said this ad nauseum to everyone, but that's something you should continue to think about. That we are here, we are here to take care of the site as a whole, not just the technical aspect of it. We have to think of the site all around. We have to work with other departments. We have to educate folks, which I'll get to in a few slides. I want to make some comments on that aspect of SEO as well. But for the most part, that's what happened once again. And I found a tweet that was out there that was talking about EAT, which is a big topic right now, especially with Your Money, Your Life type content. And I thought that this was interesting that someone posted that, that Mr. Isles from Google said at PubCon last week, and basically that the core algorithm is a collection of probably millions of small algorithms that look for signals in pages or links that could be conceptualized as EAT. There's no core component that specifically targets EAT. And I take that out basically because, not that it just perfectly leads into my next slide, but for the most part, when you think about that, where they're just talking about that one instance where there's millions of small algorithms that look for many different factors that play into that one area of the algorithm, we have to think about that from a technical standpoint, a content standpoint, a link standpoint as well. There are probably millions of small algorithms that are working in tandem, to make Google's main algorithm work. And I think that makes sense, right? There's stuff, we've seen many of the, the separate algorithms be, kind of implemented and integrated, into the main algorithm, namely Panda and Penguin, just to name ones that everyone knows. And I think when you think of it that way, it's like, man, if it has millions of different, small, tiny algorithms that are working, why would I only focus on one area? Why wouldn't I focus on all of the areas, but come up with a plan that addresses all of them in a timely fashion? And I think that's that's the way that people have to start looking at it. And not I think we're siloing ourselves and becoming and micromanaging our programs almost. It's just like, well, this quarter I'm just going to work on technical stuff. It's like, well, that means you're ignoring everything else for 3 months. That doesn't really make sense. And I think that's what a lot of people have to start thinking about. And this, just using EAT as the example, kind of leads into the next point, which is don't rent experts when you're trying to increase EAT. And for the most part, increase probably isn't the right word, but honestly, I don't know how else to put it. Now, going into this, I want everyone to, I'm going to read this tweet first. So on Twitter, someone said, someone tweeted to John Mueller, Danny Sullivan, that I am seeing a growing number of sites who are renting, quote unquote, specialist name and EAT segments to add to the bylines in order to add authority of their content. And Danny Sullivan comes back and says, it doesn't work like that. And I'm just here to say that that is the least surprising thing that I can think of after the comments that Google has made, namely John Mueller saying that, oh yeah, you should have experts review your content or write your content. Do you know what SEOs think? And that's sometimes when they make statements, this is where I get frustrated with those guys sometimes, because they know when they make statements like that, the first thing that most SEOs are going to go to is, man, how can I spam this? How can I go and find 300 people that are experts in this field and give them money and just use their name? How can I do this? And it's just like, oh, God, come on, guys, because this is what the SEO community does. We did it with links, we did it with keywords back in the day, then, and now we're doing it with experts. We did it with authorship. That's why authorship died, because we put authorship on everything we could think of. We did it with, basically we did it with schema markup, and we do these things and we wait until Google to penalize us to stop. And that's the problem. So when they make comments like this, what else did they think was going to happen? So basically, what are people doing here? They're quote unquote, they're renting people's names. They're going out, let's say you're in the medical niche, right? And you write an article. What they're basically doing is going to a doctor and saying, hey man, I'll pay you X amount or give you X amount if I can use your name, and put this on to increase my authority and my reputation within the space. And the doctor, is coming back and saying, okay, and that's what's happening. And they're doing that hundreds of times, but using the same person's name over and over and over again, right? And I think that the question comes along is, if that's not the right way to do it, which it is totally not, what is the right way to gain, legitimacy, to your money or life content? And for me, you kind of have to think of it as backlinking, right? It's an ecosystem. When I think of this, when people, I immediately knew when John said that, like a few months ago, whenever it was, about the authority, I knew immediately people are going to start, using doctors' names on it just hundreds of times over and over again. And I think what it is, you have to think more of, if you are in a medical niche, or a health niche, things of that nature, and you write a piece of content, it's more about building a community around you, right? Yes, you should get an expert to review your content. You should get an expert to write your content as well, but you have to have a reciprocal relationship with that, and you have to have a reciprocal relationship with more than one person. And I think that's where everyone gets held up. You have to do this with more than one doctor, more than one nutritionist, more than one, whatever it is, right? Or more than one financial expert. Because if you use the same person over and over again, what does that look like? it looks like you're just building crappy links to your site. It's the same theory. You're just building the same, you're using the same thing over and over. You're spamming it. It looks like a spammy tactic. And guess what, all? It is. It is a spammy tactic. And at the end of the day, what we need to do is you need to build a community around your site, right? You need to involve your community, but you also need to contribute to it. Because to contribute to a community, to get a community to contribute to you, you have to contribute to it. And the problem with a lot of the things that a lot of people do is that they only think about their site. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you have to think of the community that your site or the ecosystem that your site exists in and how you can contribute to that. Because when you can do that, when you can do that in a smart way, that's where you really start to gain the value, because then people are mentioning you on other sites, right? Then all of a sudden other experts are mentioning you on other sites and linking back to you. It's no different than a backlinking strategy, right? Or guest blogging or things of that nature. And that's how people have to start thinking about this. You have to start building a community around your site in your niche. That's the right way, in my opinion. Again, this is my opinion on how to succeed with YMYL content, because seeing stuff like this, and good for this guy from SEOtheory.com who wrote, you guys should have seen this coming. Telling people to get doctors to write or review content was an open invitation to buy light spam. And I agree with that statement 100,000%. And I also understand, like Danny's answer when he said, that he thinks that the advice is misunderstood. Of course it was misunderstood, because all that a lot of us hear is that, oh cool, all I have to do is find a doctor in my area who I can pay money to and use their name, or just steal their name, and then I'm going to be authoritative in this space. And then he goes on to talk about great content. But what started to get me to think about this is when he said experts can help produce that, but we don't know a particular expert has written anything. And that's where I think the community aspect comes into it. That we all have to start thinking about building a community around our site, but also contributing to established communities that we are trying to break into or things of that nature. So, with that said, think about it that way. If you are in one of these sectors and you're trying to increase your EAT, again, expertise, authority, trust, all of that, that's what you have to start thinking about. How can you contribute to your community so that your community can contribute back to you? And that's how we have to approach this, again, in my opinion. So, moving on. This one is probably not a surprise. I just found it interesting that people are talking about this, but it's a fair question. It is a fair question. So, on Twitter, once again, man, I spend a lot of time on Twitter. This guy, Rob over here, tweeted at John and said basically that, he's had publishers, 6 million uniques a month, yada, yada, yada. Some discussion about moving to a PWA, which is a progressive web app, which we will talk about after I answer the next point. He says he's apprehensive, which he should be. But he says, do m.urls still have a place in 2019 and beyond? And John's response, which should not surprise anybody in the year 2019 going on 2020, is that m.dot versus responsive dynamic serving. I strongly recommend not using m.urls if you can, especially with new sites. So think about that way, that this is not recommending not to use m.dot site. Hopefully this is not news to you guys. This is, responsive design took over as the preferred methodology several years ago, right around when Mobilegeddon was hitting, which was a bunch of years ago. So that's something that, if you're still on an m.dot site, I think that this should give you pause. And I don't see a lot of m.dot URLs these days. I know that there are folks out there who still have it. But at the end of the day, this is something that, if you still have an m.dot site or you're using m.dot URLs, they're seriously outdated, and you really should be thinking about how to replace your site with a responsive design, which is one URL that adapts to any device. So that is that advice there. Now, the next thing that I will touch on briefly, again, a lot of people ask me about this too. What about the PWA comment over there? Now, progressive web apps, again, are basically something that you can think of as a cached version of a part of your site or your entire site, which people can get to without an internet connection. Think of it, it's like an AMP page, but it provides a certain experience. For me, PWAs, and John agrees here, PWAs are not SEO friendly. They're very difficult to get right for SEO. I've seen very few people, maybe like 2, who have kind of done it okay, but I have never I've never suggested or heard of a successful, PWA that has replaced like a mobile experience or things of that nature. I've seen people try and break PWAs to try to get them because typically they're just a single application that, they're not meant to have many pages that are indexed. For me, they've always been a bolt-on to a website. They're a cool experience. They're an add-on experience that you can put onto your site. So that's something to think of as well. So for me, that comment, it's kind of like, don't worry about that little guy. I don't really think we have to worry about it. I don't want to, I don't think that anyone on this call, should think about a PWA as a replacement for a mobile experience. Again, I've had that question come across, but let me tell you, it's not easy to do well. John's point, it's not impossible, but it's really not something that I would suggest. What I would suggest is moving to a responsive design if you're still on an MDOT, which again, I don't see a lot of sites still on MDOTs. I know they're out there, but for the most part, if you're not responsive design right now, you really should be thinking of that like right now. Like I don't even want to say like in the next year. You should be thinking about this like 2 years ago. And you really have to move to that. So that's all I will say. So I'm leaving some time, a few minutes, to get into, I just want to make a comment on educating internally. And I threw this in last minute because I was actually in Pittsburgh yesterday, visiting an awesome client. And I was so intrigued by what this individual was able to do within his organization just by educating folks. And it was really cool to see because a lot of the times, as we know, as SEO strategists and people who are in charge of SEO, one of the hardest things is to get buy-in. One of the hardest things is to get buy-in. And I think what the best way to do, and a lot of the times we take the opportunity to educate internally as a one-off. And and that never really works out for us, right? Because a lot of organizations are still way behind the times as far as organic search goes. And what I've seen over the last couple of years, and especially, and I saw it in real life yesterday, was an individual at an organization who's in charge of SEO that came from a different division prior. He was handling email, and then he took over SEO. And the ability to take 3 or 4 different groups and talk to them about SEO and get them excited about it, and tell them about the opportunity, but also say hey, here's what I want. Here's what I would like out of this. I would like a seat at the table to talk to you, Mr. Content Marketing Manager, to talk to you, paid search folks, to talk to more C-level executives, to show you that there's a lot of value here. And here's some wins that we've done. And I know that he's done this over time. And I thought it was just really cool to see it in real time. And I was really impressed by it. When I went up there, I was like, man, this guy took the reins of this department, or took the reins of this, this thing within this company, and he really did something with it. And I think he had a lot of success with that through education. And I think he did a really good job of that to the point where, I was basically sitting there. Usually I'm brought in to help, kind of bolster, and get people to listen to the SEO strategist. But I certainly was not necessary in that conversation yesterday because this individual took it upon himself to really just say, hey, listen, we've done a really good job here. We've done a ton of education, and we want to do more, and we want you guys to be excited about it. And for me, I've had such an uphill battle, and I know a lot of folks have as well. Getting SEO, getting people excited about SEO. It was just awesome to see in real life, that happening. And and you can tell that he's been doing this for a long time, and just little by little he's been educating. So taking that that page out of that book, if you guys if you're not educating often and you're just doing one-offs, I think that's a big miss because when I go to companies and I see that there are folks internally who are constantly pushing, constantly churning, like I did yesterday, those are the folks who are amazingly successful and get the programs off the ground. So that is something that I just wanted to touch on today because I was inspired yesterday. So Eric, if you're out there listening, good job, buddy. Keep fighting the good fight. That was awesome to see yesterday. And with that, we have reached the end. 4 years, guys. 4 years. As I said before, this is my favorite part of my job, and I would not be able to do it without you. I'm going to answer, I think I have time for one question, so I'm going to get it on. So let me see. Congrats on the birthday, Pat. Thank you so much. I'm very excited. Thank you all for continuing to coming. And let's see. This is about the H1 one, which I'll answer quickly. Is it possible Mueller meant that number of H1 tags matter less than the content of the H1 tag? Like keywords in the H1 are important than counting H1s or using H1 to format text. That is a very good point. And I would probably counter-argue with or counterpoint, because I don't like arguing, counterpoint with that, and say that he said no H1s. And I think that's what was me. He literally said the words, you can be successful with 0 H1s than that. So while I like your point that, number of H1 tags, less than the content of the H1, the content of the H1 is what is I agree with you, that's the important part, right? That's the important part. But for the most part, I think that having the H1 is still very, still very important. So at the end of the day, again, this is an argument that went back and forth. Oh, I also see that the Glenn Gabe link is not working in the presentation. I will update that before we send the presentation out. But with that, everyone, thank you so much. We are at our 30-minute mark, and I want to be respectful of your time as always. Thank you so much for joining me. I love doing this. Here's to 4 more years, and we will see you guys next month.